Silicon Valley Defense Group dropped the Nasdaq 100 this week. $118 billion of private capital has been invested in defense. About 16 has actually been put on contract by the Department of War. Congress dropped the National Defense Authorization Act this week. Inside of it is a cap table surveillance system you're probably going to want to know about. The Pentagon announced a $29.5 billion initiative to build the AI arsenal of freedom. The Army ran a hackathon this week. Not any hackathon. The rules, you have to show us under the hood, your code and your interfaces, or you don't get to play. Across the board, the rules changed this week, and I'm going to explain them all. I'm Mike, and this is Last Week in DC. Silicon Valley Defense Group dropped its fourth Nasdaq 100 this week. Inside of it, lots of great stuff. Shout out to Silicon Valley Defense Group. Love all the folks over there. But the big number is $118 billion has been invested in defense tech. And over that same period of time, the Pentagon has bought about $16 billion of it. This, while obviously is looking backwards, it shows the gap between where investments are going and what the department is actually buying. The actual number is a 13% recovery rate from what investors have been putting in. And in 2025 alone, there was $40 billion in private capital invested in defense and $4 billion in actual contracts. That's 10% on the dollar. Last time I checked, venture capital is supposed to be going the other direction. These numbers are not a signal of failure of anyone involved in the system, except actually the system itself. That's why the Department of War is moving out at a breakneck speed trying to fix this. Demand signal and investors and founders trying to get after the problems are still getting beat 90% of the time, or 90% of the dollars, by traditional defense contractors and legacy primes. That's still just a fact. So here's the background. Every year for the last 4 years, the Silicon Valley Defense Group has put out their Nasdaq 100. Yes, it is a list of the top 100 companies to watch, if you will. The methodology's in there. It's a good report. It definitely shows where the landscape is for new defense technologies and new companies coming up, and who's doing well in an array of different areas. It's definitely something you should be reading, whether you're in a company or an investor or just interested in defense in general. But as the report continues to mature, more and more details and information are coming out of it, specifically funding, contracts, exits, investor positions, and a lot of other information that if you just pull back a little bit and say, okay, well, let's look at this as almost an autopsy of the last year on how these companies not only are doing internally, who's raising money, who's growing, that's all great, but where and what is the government actually investing and buying in? So lifetime capital invested in Nasdaq 100 companies is approximately $118 billion. So across the 100 companies that make it on that list, that's what they're bringing to the table. They have gone out, they have raised money, and they're showing up with $118 billion worth of investment on the table to the department's $13.5 billion that has been spent on the technology that those companies build. That is abysmal. You know, it's not a joke. Venture capital is supposed to be the other direction. If you're investing in these things, yeah, I got it. Some of these companies are new. You wouldn't expect to have a return that quickly. But in any kind of sane investment structure, you would have 3 times to 5 times revenue against where your investments have gone. We're not even close. We're not only on the wrong side of that equation, but not even close to even being equal. There's not even payback here yet. Companies are just raising themselves into infinity and beyond. Some of the data that's in this report is hugely important if you're anywhere in this space, and you should have these metrics tracked internally as well. The numbers that Silicon Valley Defense Group is tracking are critically important if you're anywhere in this space, even if these aren't your companies. These are metrics that you should be tracking internally as well. Critical technology areas that are actually being invested in. If you're on the investment side, if you need to get investments, AI, applied AI, is 70% of capital raised. One of the areas that I love that the Silicon Valley Defense Group is tracking in their annual report is contract types used by the companies who are actually winning. It's not always up to the company. You can always come in with your own contracting and acquisition strategy, and you should. It's not always up to the company of how they get contracted when you hopefully ultimately win, but it is good to know retroactively what is actually being used so you can get smart in all of these different contract types. Traditional prime FAR-based contracts make up 43% of all of the awardees on the list. So one, they're getting the prime contract. This isn't a subcontract relationship. It's not a JV. It's not some other kind of partnership that you need to get to the table. Of the contracts and the companies that are on this list, 43% of them, they are the prime. That is huge to know. Whenever I talk to people, I say, look, don't let your ego get in the way. Don't think you need to be the prime on the contract. If your goal is get your thing in the hands of the warfighter and get revenue, sometimes the fastest way is through a sub, through a JV, through some other type of partnership contract to get there. That's fine. But we now have the data that says if you're on this list 43% of the time, you are actually the prime on a traditional FAR-based contract. Additionally, OTAs make up 31% of the rest of the contract types. Only 17% are SIBRs. We've talked a lot about SIBRs. People yell at me all the time because they think I don't like SIBRs. I do, but if we used political terms here, I'm a conservative, a constitutional conservative when it comes to my belief in SIBR. If you call it America's seed fund, it should be that. No company in existence will run or raise 10, 20, 30, 60 seed round. You're either growing as a company and doing different things, or no one's ever going to invest in you. The government has done that with SIBR mills for years, giving hundreds of seed fund dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars of seed fund over hundreds and dozens of contracts to the same company. If it's America's seed fund, do a SIBR, do 2, do 3. I want to say off the top of my head, I think Anduril has 7. Great. But get off that crack pipe at some point and go be a real company. I love the fact that on this list, if you want to be one of the 100 best companies in this ecosystem, only 17% are coming to the table over the last year with SBIR being your revenue source. Phenomenal. And 9% are subcontracts. This is hugely important to know. And if you're moving into the world of getting multiple contracts and multiple contract types, this shows you right here that you need to understand both traditional FAR-based contracts and OTAs, and you need to get off the SIBR crack pipe, and you need to know how to partner, JV, or sub with somebody else who's already on contract. The biggest takeaway from this report, unfortunately, is the government is not buying what founders are building. Now, is that a misalignment of understanding? I don't think so. I think many of the people who are on this list, and even those that are entering into this space today, have a pretty damn good idea of what the department needs. The slow buying process is due to, I believe, 2 things. One, the slow process. It's getting faster. Warfighter acquisition system and warfighter acquisition reforms are underway. They're speeding things up. We were lucky enough to get into the Undersecretary of War, Research and Engineering, Mission Capabilities, Technical Exchange meeting this week. They outlined a lot of ways that they were going to speed up the process. They were going to implement hard go, no-go gates so that, look, if you submit, you know if you're in or out. There shouldn't be this endless waiting around. This burns resources, it burns time, money, and it just adds a level of ambiguity or uncertainty that doesn't need to be in an already jacked up process. So everyone is moving in the right direction to do this, but the moral of the story is the things that are getting the big contracts are programs that are executed by the big primes. Dollars aren't the dollars in pure dollar for dollar analysis isn't always necessarily the right way to look at health of the ecosystem, if you will. At the end of the day, a Ford-class aircraft carrier costs $17 billion, period. That's not the problem. The problem is what Silicon Valley Defense Group rightly shows, that the investment dollars are so substantially misaligned with what the department is actually buying. The investors aren't investing in General Dynamics or Bath Iron Works or NASCO, where they make these ships. They're investing in the small companies and the new companies and the startups and the next generation of defense technology that they're just not buying in real dollars when you look at it in relation to the investment dollars, not overall dollars spent. So that really makes me scratch my head of, are we over investing without really doing the due diligence in what the department actually needs and can buy? Now, that's a much longer conversation, but my answer is yes. The idea that you're going to create a new market through brute force and a massive private investment might not be true. And if it is, in the rare anomalous edge case, it is not going to be systemically the path to success. The government, at the end of the day, does not care how much money you raised. They care that you make a thing that they need and they have a way to buy it. That's the problem that we're still facing, and that's why that's so mismatched. There are only so many programs of record. There are only so many opportunities to change that process. And I've always been very harsh on new companies who can't say before they go out and raise way too much fucking money where they ultimately live inside the warfighting acquisition system. If you can't show me something that kind of sort of looks like what you do inside the budget, and you are attempting a net new area, a net new capability that does not have any similar program today, you are on a much longer road than all of the other companies that can move an incumbent off of the contract during recompete or be added to a program during on-ramp or refresh. Participating in currently executing programs is a much faster road to success than thinking you are going to create a new area of the defense budget that's going to have your name all over it. And that's just the reality. We want the Manhattan projects of tomorrow, but if you're a company or you're an investor, you have to understand that the paths to that are not fast. Over-raising and bringing a mountain of private capital does not change that reality, is what it is. And the numbers here show it. What the numbers do show us and what you can take away from this, and here's the good news story. Maybe not. Good news for some people. If you're in applied AI, just sprinkle AI on everything, right? If you're in applied AI, you have 75% of the capital, but you are absolutely in the most crowded part of new defense tech, new war tech. On the other hand, if you're in contested logistics, quantum, biotech, integrated system of systems, or data, like pure actual data and orchestration, you are probably in one of the most open and uncrowded markets there is across defense tech right now. A lot less capital is being invested in those things, maybe bar unmanned surface vessels from contested logistics. But when you look at real contested logistics, as was defined by the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering's critical technology lead on contested logistics, they're essentially looking at three things in this area. They're looking at, one, how to actually move things, because believe it or not, the global war on terror made us terrible at moving things under a contested environment because we own the air, and outside of IEDs, we own the roads. Two, how to network all of your logistics together. Think Amazon, think Walmart, think FedEx. Amazon doesn't warehouse all of their products. They're distributed in vendors across the world. When you buy it, they figure out how to get it to you. They're closer to a dispatcher than they are actually a company themselves. When you look at Walmart, when something is scanned at Walmart and it's purchased, that demand signal goes back to their buyers, their warehousing, and they know to replace them beyond predictive analytics, but just point of sale awareness of their data of what needs to get put back on the shelf is inherent throughout their entire system. And then if you look at things like FedEx and global shipping, hub and spoke, just on time delivery, all of these things require significant data and software infrastructure and integration layers. And that's part two of contested logistics. So I'm telling you right now that there's some marine supply captain sitting on Hawaii right now that's probably got his property book on his desktop in spreadsheet. There might be paper involved as well. Just saying. And then third, on contested logistics, it's making things on the edge, like actually making things on the edge. Can you make water on the edge? Can you make power on the edge? Can you make anything on the edge? Because in the case of Indo-PACOM, the Chinese Communist Party has made it very clear that they're going to target our old, slow, dumb systems like the KC-46, KC-135, the TAO Oilers, the C-130s, and all of the things that are C-17s that are all required to bring our things into theater, ultimately starving out the human beings and the systems that need fuel and other logistics to continue the fight. We have to figure out how to make things in theater forward so we don't rely on a reach back going back to Guam, Hawaii, or San Diego when we know that that's where the adversary is going to target day one. That's just looking across contested logistics. I'm telling you, there is not nearly enough investment in this area. There is far more need when you talk to the actual folks in the department than AI. But conversely, AI is getting all of the or 75% of the investment money from Silicon Valley Defense Group 100 companies, which shows that maybe the investors are not always investing in the right areas as well. Everyone's to blame here a little bit. And that's okay, because now we have the data and you can get it right. Monday morning, download the report, read it cover to cover, look for the gaps, look for the seams, look for the opportunities, figure out where you fit in the scenario, where you can do better. They have some really good recommendations inside the report. I love that they put that out there. Silicon Valley Defense Group has 4 recommendations that they have brought forward. Measure adoption, not activity. And these are all for the department, but you can reverse engineer these and think through how you present whatever you do to your government customer. Measure adoption, not activity. Okay. What is actually in contract? What is actually in the hands of the warfighter? Not did you host another industry day? Not did you host another hackathon? Right, so on and so forth. All the solicitations in the world that get published that don't get awarded are not helpful. Talk in terms of adoption. When can I get my things into people's hands to help you solve your mission. Rebuild the acquisition workforce. This is huge. The contracting officers and the acquisition professionals, the PMs, there's just a massive deficiency there. That's why you see things like consortium OTAs. That's why nonprofits such as One Nation Innovation and others perform these contracting specialist and program management duties for places like Rock Island Armory, just because there are just not enough warranted contracting officers and program managers to be government people doing this. That's obviously a huge area of investment that we can make in the acquisition workforce. Continue to utilize the Office of Strategic Capital and now the new Economic Development Unit to make long-term and deeper investments, not in, this is my analysis if this is not theirs, but we have really great ways, even if it's not as much as we would like. The government knows how to buy the end item. They know how to buy a widget that has a SKU number. They don't know how to buy things that are deeper in the supply chain, from parts and components all the way down to the natural resources and minerals and rare earth and all the shit that has to go into it. Utilizing the Office of Strategic Capital and the Economic Defense Unit, we can shore up some of those issues for our industrial base and maybe start bringing more component manufacturers to bear. Shout out to Anello. They make a inertial navigation device that's been integrated onto the Lucas after they won APIC. Components and parts of systems are just as, if not more important for the delivery of systems to the warfighter and the advancement and enhancement of them. This is someplace, and I know Anello is doing really good, but if you have more OSC, more EDU, and more investor capital into components, that story of investment versus contract dollars may be very different. Anello just got a pretty substantial tens of millions of dollars AppFit contract, and they make a component. And finally, probably the most common sense recommendation that they have, we all wish they would do this, actually publish what you plan to invest in. There is one organization, and I already brought them up, but there's one organization that does this. They do this really well, and I had an opportunity to speak to some of the folks who come out of there that are in this shop earlier this week, and I very much told them so. Army Contracting Command is the best. Period. Full stop. They put out an advanced procurement brief for industry. They will tell you what they're going to buy. They're going to tell you when they're going to contract for it. They're going to tell you when the current contract expires, when they're doing on-ramps or refresh. They give you the names of the contracting officers so that you're aware of all of this. They give you the names of the TPOC and you can get in there. The government absolutely should be telling industry what they intend to buy to the greatest extent possible. But I might be talking to you if you have never read a J-book before, because we all cry about the PPB process and the POM process and why does it take so long? Yes, copy. But the other side of that coin is you get a 4-year budget projection. They will tell you what they are considering buying 4 years out. The 27 president's budget is live right now. If you go to the areas that you make your technology in, you can go in and see how much they are projecting to invest in that area today. So yes, we have to do better and explain to industry. The government has to do better and explain to industry what they're going to buy. Yes, they have to give proper demand signals. Yes, but also I'm talking to you if you've never read a J-book and you don't understand where the government's already told you you're going to invest. This might be a you problem. So demand signals are important. Absolutely agree with SVDG. They should publish what they plan to buy. Army Contracting Command, APBIs, you can just put in APBI into the search in sam.gov and you will pull it up. Everyone should be required to put one out. As always, I agree with Silicon Valley Defense Group, and I thank them for putting this out. I was saddened to not make it this year, but watch everything they do. Read the report. It is immensely helpful if you can read between the lines and you can take some of these signals and trends that they're doing a great job of tracking and apply them to yourself. The House Armed Services Committee published the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act. And as always, the headlines are $1.4 trillion. Not real money, but we'll get into that. Additionally, there's 4 mandates in the NDAA for this year that are really significant and you should absolutely be tracking. 1, a dedicated alt P&T czar. 2, forced dual sourcing for solid rocket motors. 3, industrial-based policy specifically looking to audit and root out Chinese capital. And 4, a visualization tool for economic security risk assurance that's going to look at your cap table and show the government who your investors are. Here's the background. Every year, because of that pesky little thing that we have called the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says a lot of things. Amongst it, it says govern the rules of land and naval forces. The Congress governs the rules of land and naval forces through the annual National Defense Authorization Act, where it tells the military what to do. Civilian control of the military does not start with the president as the commander-in-chief. Civilian control of the military in the United States starts with the United States Congress, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. So, here's the congressional process for the National Defense Authorization Act. First and foremost, it's an authorizing bill, National Defense Authorization Act. Some things, when authorized, become law and become immediately enacted. If you look at any substantial moment in the Department of Defense, now the Department of War, most of it comes from Congress. If you look at why we have combatant commands and a joint staff, it's one of the biggest historical congressional efforts that happened in modern history. The Goldwater-Nichols Act, the NDAA of 1986, fiscal year 1986, created the modern Joint Force, Joint Chiefs of Staff, U.S. SOCOM, the Assistant Secretary for Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict, and many, many other things. That was governed by Congress. It was passed into law, and it started going into effect. When the Congress, on behalf of the U.S. people, want the military to do something, this is where it happens. There are other parts of this bill, most specifically the funding tables, that are part of a process and, though are passed into law, still need follow-on activities. The authorization of the dollars are opening up a bank account that is FDIC insured up to $250,000. Congratulations. You opened up a bank account and you told me how much I could put into it. You still need the appropriation to actually put the dollars in that bank account. This is part one kind of the budget process. The headline is usually, how much money is in the bill? It's not real money. That's fine. Everybody's heard me say this at this point. The chairman's mark was released. The chairman's mark is the first part of the NDA process. They will publish the chairman's mark. That is what the House Armed Services Committee, their subcommittees, their chairs, their subcommittee chairs, their ranking members, and the professional staff and the personal office staff has all put together. That's on committee. The next step will happen on June 4th at 10 a.m., which you should be watching, will be the full committee markup of the NDAA. This is where everyone on the House Armed Services Committee gets a swing at the bill. They'll add things in. Then it will move to the floor for passage in the House chamber. We don't yet have the Senate version of the National Defense Authorization Act. I am sure it will come out shortly. There are some interesting parts about this bill that I'm going to get into. One of them that I don't know is fully obvious, and I could definitely be wrong here, allegedly, but There's a lot of talk about doing a reconciliation package, a $350 to $500 billion reconciliation package that would have covered the traditional roughly $1 trillion in defense spending to get up to the president's $1.5 trillion publicly stated request and the fiscal year 2027 president's budget request to Congress. So with the Armed Services Committee getting very close to the president's top line, this may be a signal that they want to do all of the president's 1.5 through Congress in discretionary spending rather than having to do another reconciliation package in mandatory spending. There's a lot of reasons why, but if the Appropriations Committee follows suit with what the Armed Services Committee have done, we could see the president's whole 1.5 trillion for defense spending come through actual appropriations and discretionary funds rather than having to do another reconciliation. One of the main reasons why I believe the Armed Services Committee chose to go in this direction is because we are in the midst of the normal, regular order process of getting the NDAA and the appropriations bills done. Adding a reconciliation adds a whole other set of processes to what is already a middle of the year activity to get very hard things done, which is get the NDAA and the appropriations bill done. I don't think they want to add another process to that. So if the president's $1.5 trillion can be funded through normal appropriations means in discretionary spending, I think they want to go in that direction. And to me, that's the biggest signal coming out of the release of the chairman's mark is let's do this through our normal process. Let's talk about the 4 biggest changes I see in this bill at first read. It's massive. It will continue to change through the process. But when we talk about signaling and messaging and the House leadership in the Armed Services Committee making their mark and telling the world what they want to see. First, precision navigation and timing, czar. What does that mean? In the government, we appoint people to be in charge of subject matter that essentially work for the president directly and somehow superstructurally outside of the normal chain of command. They don't really have authority unless they do, and they get that actual authority by being authorized in law. So the House Armed Services Committee has put forward a statutory role for the leader of precision navigation and timing, which would include GPS alternatives, quantum navigation, and anomalous tracking of things in the spectrum. It would be one official, a budget line, and decision authority. If you are in PNT, alt PNT, GPS, other navigation, or other spatial awareness when it comes to spectrum, this might be your new boss. Now, how is that going to happen? We don't really know. Implementation is where the work actually happens to write the charter for this person, so on and so forth. But the House Armed Services Committee is signaling that they see precision navigation and timing as so important and so separate and distinct from the rest of the responsibilities, even as the department goes through a restructure for program acquisition executives, that it needs to be a single solitary person that manages the entirety of the department's programs for PNT. Very big statement coming out of the House Armed Services Committee. This is potentially as big as defining Space Comm and Space Force as a new warfighting domain. PNT getting a specific leader could really shake things up on how the department buys things and plans for things. Another big movement is in industrial-based policy when it comes to economic security risk assurance. They're adding legislative machinery that is going to require CFIUS-style review and transparency in your cap tables. They're going to want to know who is investing. Now, there has been other initiatives to do this in the past. Foreign ownership and control of companies in the SBIR reauthorization was a huge point of contention. Additionally, under the last Trump administration, when Ellen Lord was the undersecretary for A&S, acquisition and sustainment, there was an attempt to make a trusted capital marketplace. You come to us, you show us who your LPs are, we'll let you have preferable investment, mechanisms into defense technologies. That initiative didn't work for an array of reasons. They're reverse engineering this and saying, okay, you don't want our trusted capital. That's fine. Go get your money from wherever you want. But now we're going to put those trust policies in place for you, and we're going to need to see where you get your money from, because at the end of the day, foreign ownership control is a huge issue as we reconcile the fact that, especially in drones, you can't have a hellscape or a replicator program to fight the Chinese Communist Party if the Chinese Communist Party owns your supply chain for drones. It's the same thing in capital. We want to know as a government and as a country that your investors aren't our adversary and doing things internally in your business, in your funding stream, delaying things or forcing you to do things that are not in the national interest if you want to be in defense technology. It makes a lot of sense on the surface. I understand it's harder said than done, or easier said than done, but this is the direction that they're going. Easier said than done. Anyways, this is the direction that Congress is going, and they're going to start requiring this. It's going to be statutory. You're going to see this as a supply chain and risk mitigation, a foreign ownership and control mitigation measure that could have the same weight as, say, CMMC. We'll find out. $29.5 billion for the AI Foundry of Freedom. The department requested $29.5 billion for supercomputing infrastructure. Awesome. Friend of mine is a big time important person at Google, Mr. Josh Marcuse. Shout out to Josh. Has been told me one of the most eye-opening concepts I'd ever heard about AI. Everyone wants AI, and this is years ago. This is maybe almost 10 years ago now. Everyone wants the AI, but if you skip the actual computing, the actual data, you're not going to get anywhere near the results you need. And the supply chain and the infrastructure for AI and supercomputing actually is not in the widgets themselves at all. We've seen this come to life since then. Data centers, hugely controversial issue now. The billions of dollars that have been invested in training, developing, housing, storing, all of the most used, I guess you would say, the most common LLMs, whether they be OpenAI or Claude. These are now systems where the government is looking at and saying, we need the infrastructure to back this up internally as well. More than just understanding that they need to invest in it, there's also going to be mandates and dictates to centralize, get off service stove-piped systems. I will find this and I will post this in the link. There was a GAO report that was put out 3, maybe 5 years ago that said there are over 1,000 logistics and financial management systems throughout just the Department of Defense. Yeah. How that's even possible, I can't fathom. But I'll tell you what, Walmart's inventory management system is on one service. Your local Walmart isn't contracting their own AI provider or their own data provider or their own cloud compute provider and doing their own thing. The Department of War is the world's largest organization by headcount, by annual operational fund, by inventory and equipment on hand, tenfold any commercial entity even close to it. And the closest next thing is actually Walmart. When you're looking at what this really means is, yes, they're going to make the investment in data centers. We already know that. The president and everyone has already said that. We're going to go to sovereign energy and infrastructure. We're going to pull it off the grid. We have an SMR program, a small microreactor program, already starting in the Army. We know this. The Army Strategic Capital Initiative is leaning into this really heavily. The big part of this is going to be breaking down service and inter-service stovepipes so that everyone gets on one system. This has been an initiative that has been tried so many times, and it is absolutely insane that we still do not have singular systems on the business side of the Department of War that any other large organization would have every day of the week. If you are in the military, an E4 is an E4. I don't care if you call them corporal. I don't care if you call them specialist. I don't care if you call them airmen. The pay chart for the Department of War says E4 with this time in service gets this much money. Why we have disparate financial management systems for payroll is insane. But there are thousands of them across all the business processes in the department. If nothing else, if this $29.5 billion in AI does nothing but consolidate systems, I don't even need Skynet out of this. I don't need this to be the one cloud to end them all. I just think that there's so much money to be spent in killing redundant business systems that we could buy a whole new aircraft carrier every single year with the amount of money that we would spend if we just killed like 90% of the back off business systems and migrate everybody to one consolidated department-wide accounting system, financial management system. Man, what would that do for the audit? Craziness. What's this really going to do? We'll find out. Maven, highly controversial from day one. It's had different shapes and forms. Is it going to become Skynet? Are we going to have singularity, and are we going to have one system that controls? Probably not. But there's a lot that can be done. And one of the best parts of the department's proposition on this is it's led by the CDAO. If we're going to have a CDAO, this is what they do. Enterprise across the board. What does that mean for you? If anything in AI foundation, framework, if any of this has anything to do with you, AI infrastructure, AI foundations, data, cloud, any of this, CDAO and Tradewinds. Tradewinds Marketplace is where you're going to do business with the CDAO. If you saw, go back a couple episodes, we had the amazing Bonnie Evangelista in here. She basically is the guru of all things OTA. She set up the Tradewinds Marketplace OTA for CDAO. This is going to be the tool that they do all of this work through. It's my guess, allegedly. USDRNE is going to have a big part to play in it, but as we look at what the department-wide reforms are, they're getting back to charter of if an organization exists, what do they do? This could not be more clear as day, the role for CDAO going forward. Breaking down service and agency unique and siloed systems and getting them all into one oracle, if you will. Not only is it a really cool name, Operation Jailbreak, but it is absolutely the next generation of MOSA and MOSA compliance. And if you've ever met Alex Miller, the Army CTO, he is very serious about making this happen. Army just ran a 30-day hackathon called Operation Jailbreak. It was specifically focused on a new term called the right to integrate. You are no longer allowed to deal with the Army, come in with the software that says, no. I have a software no one else can play. Or if you want them to play, they have to come ask me for the keys to the castle. These are untenable and predatory relationships that have existed for far too long. Welcome to the new Army. Welcome to Operation Jailbreak. Welcome to Right to Integrate realities. If you're going to sell software to the Army, your integration has to be public, and you will have to hand it over so that people can play on your system. If that's not your business model, too bad, so sad, because some of the software that was evaluated and hacked, I guess, during the hackathon is already deployed to CENTCOM. The Army CTO is very serious about this. Shout out to Alex Miller. He's doing great things for the Army. Here's the background on this. The Army brought in more than 50 companies, engineers, no BD, no lobbyists, no CEOs, engineers. 20 of them showed up to Fort Carson, Anduril, Boeing, General Dynamics, Palantir, big surprise, and another handful of small companies. The idea is to get to an API marketplace that anyone can integrate on anything. The idea is an API marketplace where anyone can integrate on anything. Another big term that people are using all the time now, sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't, is ecosystem. Alex Miller very clearly said you will not be in the Army's API ecosystem unless you play by the rules. And the rules are, show me your ICD. I need to see how others integrate with you. No longer a preference, not a nice to have. This is a forceful implementation of the next generation of MOSA and is great for everyone. Melissa Johnson, who is the acquisition executive for U.S. Special Operations Command, they just got done with their giant event, Soft Week. She said, closed systems are a liability. Bring us things that can fit within an open architecture, that are modular, and can be upgraded. Closed systems are a liability, and legacy systems either have to open up or go away. You have two senior leaders of large organizations with large budgets that are absolutely laying the rules out, and most, after rule, after regulation, after law, continue to get strengthened to open up the marketplace. I'm actually glad to see those big companies, Palantir, Anduril, Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed, whoever else was there, because if they're showing up and they're showing their integration, we might see more opportunity for small businesses and startups to ride on huge enterprise contracts that the primes have, and hopefully in a way that's not predatory. Tons of solicitations out on the street. Some of them are closing sooner than you might like, but they are all over the board. SOCOM has a Group 2 UAS solicitation open. The requirements are in plain English, clear as day. Just like Silicon Valley Defense Group said, tell the industry what you need, what you are going to buy. They have a solicitation. It's open on Vulcan. If you're not on Vulcan, you have to be on Vulcan to do business with SOCOM. They want a Group 2 UAS, 20-kilometer plus range, 6 hours of endurance, 2 payloads at 5 pounds combined. Very clear what they need. Must operate in RF contested environment. GNSS denied navigation. Then they have desired ranges. Obviously, they're higher than the minimum. They are scheduling vendor presentations July 15th and 16th down in Tampa. Technical evaluations September and October. And they're preparing for OT&E operational test and evaluation, aka deploying with SOCOM units in limited quantities to go see if your things work in real life. That'll happen January, February of 2027. Everyone in the government is, well, not everybody. Many people in the government are getting better at putting the information up and forward. If you're in Group 2 UAS, it sounds like SOCOM's done a pretty good job of explaining what they need and when. SOCOM, keep it going. Hypervelocity improved capability assault rifle. SOCOM is seeking a weapons conversion kit for legacy 5.56 systems, and the goal is to extend the effective SOF, Special Operations Forces, carbine range from 300 meters to 600 meters. I got a lot of thoughts on that. Best of luck to anyone who's trying to enter the firearms world. We'll leave it at that. DIU, the Defense Innovation Unit, has a mine countermeasure modernization prize challenge. They are looking to award 3 companies, $3 million. You got to be TRL 7. They're looking for 2 categories of counter mine technology, 1 near surface or moored, and then bottom attack mines. Top performers are going to be invited to submit for a $50 million rapid acquisition IDIQ in August of 2026. If you win a prize challenge, ladies and gentlemen, listen, Linda, listen to me. If you win a prize challenge and you get your big $10,000 cartoon-sized check, you have satisfied competition and contracting, and you can be sole sourced from there. This is exactly what the Army Fuse is doing. This is exactly what DIU is doing. I got it. You may be too far along in your journey to think a $10,000 cartoon check is worth your time. Getting sole sourceable and knowing that there's a $50 million IDIQ that is going to post, according to DIU, in August of this year is worth it. $3 million prize challenge, $50 million opportunity that you will only qualify for if you win the prize challenge. Hello, you're getting more information now than you've ever gotten before. You can't say you don't do this. I don't know who's in mine countermeasures, but this is all you. And in good news, the government actually bought something. The Marine Corps awarded Rune Technologies a contract under Project Dynamis, Rune's predictive analytics and AI platform for handling workflows will be incorporated in future Marine Corps systems and Project Dynamis. Go back to what I said earlier about contested logistics. Look at what Transcom is looking for. They need to understand where their things are, because if you just pull an old adage from every worn out war college that we have in this country, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. You have to feed and water an army for them to be able to fight. The Marine Corps knows this, because if the shit goes down tomorrow, they're the ones that are going to be fighting the fight. A couple things to watch for next week and some events that just popped up. First and foremost, the House Armed Services Committee full committee markup, again, will be on June 4th at 10 o'clock. You should have these on your schedule. These are not things that you should be pulling down the transcript and, chat GPTing a summary. You should listen to what the members are saying. These are the congressional leaders who tell the military what to do. You should listen to their words and their how and why, and they come to these decisions of what goes in the NDAA. This is not something you should be getting the Cliff Notes for. This is something that if you deeply understand how the members of Congress who run the Armed Services Committee think and feel about things, and that's not only through markups, but that's hearings and testimony, you will have a better idea of the direction of where the military is going. Because, spoiler alert, when the NDAA gets passed into law, that's what the military is going to do next year by law. 2, a new conference popped here in DC, the Counter UAS Technology Conference. I was fortunate enough to be able to speak at this in San Diego, I think 2 years ago now. It is a great conference, very small in nature of, if you look at it in relation to, say, like a Reagan National Defense Forum or even a Soft Week, right? These are very, very small. But I'll tell you what, the folks that put this on, they bring in PEOs, PMs, CPEs. They bring in the people you actually want to be talking to. And as always, Frontier House, July 11th, we have the great Devin Bohannon, the program manager for AppFit, Accelerated the Procurement and Fielding of Innovative Technologies. The new cycle is open. R&E put out all the information at the TEM yesterday. The AppFit website is updated. Devin will be here at the Frontier House answering all of your questions and doing an industry engagement to get deep into the how and why the program works. He has always been incredibly open about the selection process, what makes a great app fit, just in general as a capability, what makes a great app fit package. This is the department's most highly competitive program. Awards up to $50 million, which now, thankfully, given the reconciliation plus up that we had to AppFit over the last year, have actually started being issued or awarded. There are now two $50 million winners. Devin will talk everybody through how to do that, answer very specific questions. He's very generous with his time. He comes out during every cycle. This is not one to miss. Make sure you go on the AppFit website, get all the latest and greatest information that they're putting out, and get ready for the next cycle. Next cycle is open up right now. I would assume, I wasn't on the website today, but if they've put the new dates out, I would expect you're looking at submission from your sponsor, which, depending on who your sponsor is, could mean going through a service acquisition executive in late August, early September. So that means right now you need to be getting with your sponsor, you need to be building out your package, and you need to be understanding your service or agency sponsor internal timeline so that you meet all your marks all the way up to that August, probably, submission to the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering so that Devin can start running those packages. Either way, July 11th, Frontier House, he'll be here. If you're not a member, join. If you're not subscribed to the show and you like it and it's helpful, subscribe, like, share, send it to somebody who needs to know more about what's going on in the world. I'm not saying I have the answers to everything, and I'm not saying I'm right about everything all the time, but you gotta kind of make this really DC complicated acronym-y stuff make a little more sense. If this helps it make more sense to you, share it with somebody else. We appreciate any support. As always, bitches, complaints, moans, comments, questions, all the above, send them. Email, text, chat, Signal, LinkedIn. I have all the things and all the stuff. The team will pull them all out if you want to see a special segment. If I missed something, if you want to go over it, let me know. I'm Mike. That was Last Week in DC. See you next time.